Where do we start? So we often think this is where we start. We need to capture our requirements and pull those together. But actually there are some things that we need to think about before we do that. So who needs to input and work on that project in itself? Not just, we talked about stakeholders a lot, but who is subject matter experts? Who knows those jobs? Coordinating the right people, skills and resources and actually pulling those together. Planning the work and the key milestones is also really, really crucial. Documenting, I'll emphasise this throughout, write stuff down, capture it, put it somewhere and keep it. Everything from your team discussions, your actions, your issues, having something central. And we'll touch on that a little bit more a little later on. Monitoring the team progress throughout those milestones and through the project completion, and also reporting back to the project sponsor or lead stakeholder. So depending on your business, you may have an actual project manager who's going to work with some of those things. Quite often we find with a lot of our customers, they don't have a dedicated project manager, and the lead person who's looking after the project is also expected to do the project management activities too. So I appreciate that can be quite a challenge. So who to involve? I found from my experience, a big thing is to balance who wants to be involved versus who actually needs to be involved. I think we were speaking a little bit earlier, kind of around CEOs and interviews. You know, do you really need them? They want to be involved, but do you need them to be involved? So the two main challenges that we find are there are not enough people working on the project, or there are too many. The too many, less so, is something we see less frequently, but is equally detrimental that we find throughout the project. So not enough people is something that I would say I experience on most projects that I work with. And quite often it can be senior stakeholders holding on to things and not wanting to let go and not letting that flow throughout the business and trusting people to kind of run with things. You probably have a resource or a capacity issue. If you're expected to implement a system and do your day job, automatically you've got a resource issue. So it kind of goes without saying. Skill shortage can also have quite a significant impact too. So if you don't have the right skills and understanding, you know, technical knowledge is generally not needed throughout an Eploy implementation, but I know certainly there are lots of systems I've implemented in my previous life where you do need a really strong degree of technical knowledge and you have to kind of learn as you go. So that can be a real challenge to get your head around that and do the implementation and do your day job as well. So too many people, again, as I said, less common, but can really, really slow down your decision-making process. And I've experienced this firsthand implementing a project myself as a customer. It can also lack focus if you've got too many people involved. So if you're kind of got some people running off and doing one thing one way, some people another way, somebody needs to carefully manage that. And typically it tends to fall on the person in charge because the buck stops with them. So typically this is what a lot of our customers think a project looks like. We start off with starting the project, we go away and build a system, we configure it and we set it live. And you're absolutely right, but there are some really key things that you're missing. The whole phase of work that starts before that. We call it customer readiness. Some people call it kind of like, you know, pulling the specification together. It's ultimately getting your requirements, capturing them, getting them down on paper and giving them to the supplier and working with the supplier to make sure that that works. So it might be filling in spreadsheets, it might be doing workshops, whatever you kind of need. And then the last one, our final phase, is kind of when we have the project closure, but when we go live at Eploy, we don't just hand you over to our support team and that's it. We actually have a hypercare period, so it's when you actually launch your product. So we might set it live, but obviously it doesn't stop there, it carries on. So we have a period where your implementation manager is actually your support desk, so they've built your system and they kind of know that. So in terms of that, thinking about who's involved with the project, just thinking about in terms of these dotted lines representing kind of how much involvement people have. Ultimately, your main kind of stakeholder or your sponsor will have constant, and I expect your kind of senior stakeholders to have constant involvement throughout, from beginning right the way through to the end, but it's intermittent. It will kind of come in as and needed. Your core team will be there all the time. They're consistent. They should always be working on this project and not just a week here and a week there. And then finally, your subject matter experts again, bring them in right from the beginning, right the way through to the end. So the key thing is there, it's basically the same. Everybody must be involved all the way from the beginning all the way to the end if you want to get through to a successful implementation. So day to day, a big challenge here is keeping this business as usual. It's the biggest challenge that I hear from all of my customers is I haven't got time to do that because. And I'm sure Sam's nodding as well, so it's something I'm sure we'll all echo. We've all experienced this, I know I certainly have. But what can we do? So what you need to think about is planning out the work that needs to be done at the same time. Plan for things as you expect them to go, but don't forget to plan for it to all go horribly wrong. Always plan for the worst. Anything else then is a bonus, and it's all good. So what are your day-to-day activities? Have a think about those. But then also beyond that, think about what other kind of activities do you have. Think about your monthly activities, your reporting, those kind of things, one-to-ones, meeting commitments, all of those kind of things. It's a really cheesy adage, isn't it? But work smarter, not harder. So we all work hard. I think everybody can attest to that. But what can we do to actually work a little bit smarter? So reducing waste. Are you really, everything you do, is it really needed? I think of the amount of reports I used to push out to managers and kind of business leaders. Did they actually look at it? Did they actually need it and what was in there? So if you stop sending it, does anybody notice? Tried that once. Only one person mentioned, where's this report, Kim? I'm like, what do you use it for? Explain to me. Like, I just like to have a look at it. So the other 35 people I used to send it to didn't even look at it. So I stopped doing it. Upskilling. What opportunity do you have to upskill within your team? Classic example I had when I was a customer of Eploy, and I had an apprentice at the time who I just knew was just right to move on. In the 2 years I'd worked with her, she then moved through 3 roles. I was actually a HR and systems expert. So she actually moved from a kind of an apprentice role within 2 years and just straight up. So she was fantastic. So what can you do? What can you do to kind of get your team to reach higher? And who are your shining stars and your high potentials, depending on kind of how you measure things, if you use like the 9 box. And are you using those people? So have they got skills that you could be drawing on that they don't have? I pulled somebody in from the customer service team in one of my old roles. She got hidden light, found kind of like interrogating the database. She'd actually got HR qualification to a quite high level, and she's fantastic. She's now kind of moved on, has got a really kind of great job at PwC. So yeah, she's really moved on. But if I hadn't have kind of extracted her from somewhere else in the business, kind of the project wouldn't have gone as well as planned. Expertise. Do you need any expertise that you don't already have within your business? Do you potentially need to do any outsourcing, whether it's temporarily or long term? I've worked with people who've quite often brought in a third party to work for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever that might be. Again, I know that's a balance with resource, but it's something to think about. Backfilling. Can you actually take somebody out of their role and backfill them within the business? Again, that will come down to resource or capacity. And can you also get those people in time? That's also another consideration. Not sure if you've ever seen anything like this before, but ultimately what these 5 factors are around the outside, so results, commitment, process, communication and trust, are the 5 main success factors to a successful team, so a high-performing team. And the idea is that you can go through a process, and I'm happy to have a chat with this with anybody else, and there are lots of different kind of tools on the market or strategies if you kind of come into like your HR world of how this works. But ultimately you can capture from your own perspective and also get your team to capture where they fit in terms of each of those criteria, each of those like results, commitment. And the idea is we're looking for a beautiful little pentagon in the centre. But typically you might start off and it looks a little bit like that. So you might have a team that is, really not communicating very well with each other. Your process is a bit dodgy. The results aren't great, but actually you've got a really committed, dedicated team who really trust and work well with each other. Review your processes. Are they fit for purpose? The next one is something that we don't often think about. What actually does work for you? We concentrate on the next one, what doesn't work for you, but we often forget to think about what does work well in our business and why it works well. So if it's working for you, make sure you carry it through and try and keep that process in there. And what's your perfect process? If you could scrap everything and just not think about kind of current ways of working, what's utopia? What does it look like to you? Think about that as well. Collaborate comes back into stakeholder engagement again, I think, as most things do, but involve people who actually do the job. When I looked at HR and payroll system a few years back, first thing I did is I sat down the HR and training administrators and then the payroll admin team and the payroll manager and said, right, tell me how you work and tell me what you want. I was told that I should go to maybe like the kind of the head of finance or somebody first. I'm like, no, I want to start ground. I want to start right at the bottom and start there. So involve the people who do it. Consult with your customers. So we talk about customers every day as perhaps in Laura's example as the people who visit the centres and take their family bowling. But actually for us it means, customer to me is anybody I deal with. You're all my customers today, day to day, but we don't think about actually the people that we're dealing with day to day. So who are your customers and think about that. Bringing in directors and seniors, quite often we'll have somebody who is a stakeholder and we'll start the process off and then step back, but make sure you bring them in and involve them all the way through the process. So collating the information, so store it somewhere that the information is accessible to everybody. That might be a single folder within a shared drive on your network. It could be that you have something like Google Docs or SharePoint, Dropbox, whatever it is, make sure it's something that people can access. And if you can make it so it's accessible when they're not in the office, that would be awesome. Because if you've got something where you have to VPN through something when you're off-site working with a supplier, that can be really slow. So if you've got something that's a bit more responsive, that will massively help you. Make sure that you keep the information clear and straightforward, and also keep copies of revisions. It can be quite difficult if you don't do that to track back where a decision changed, where something changed, why I thought we were doing something differently, what happened. If you haven't kept that, it's difficult to lose. So just making sure you to keep them, just a little archive folder so you've just got them there can be really super handy. Agree and document, again, back to the writing it down, plan it, write it down. Confirm agreement with each process and document what was agreed, when it was agreed and by whom. So if somebody comes back later, your payroll manager comes back later and said, nope, that can't work like that. It's like, but you said it was fine here. And they might go, oh yeah, okay, it's fine. Or they might go, actually, I've changed my mind now, but actually if you've got something to fall back on, it really is super helpful again. Before you get going, there's some things to think about. So processes being fit for purpose. Imagine your future ways of working. Don't necessarily think about how you work today. You've already should have done that part where you've looked at your processes and then figured out what you need them to be. We have lots of our customers who fill in our specifications and they give me everything they've got today. It's no good. What do you want it to be in the future? You want to improve your processes? Let's take that forward. What do you need to do? Are you doing needless work? So we come back to the kind of reducing waste. And how are you going to capture those requirements and who will you involve? So workshops is a fantastic way to go about this. So internal workshops and getting you kind of working through a process. Those are fabulous where you can actually have a workshop and say, right, today we're going to look at the onboarding process, bring all of the partners involved and actually nail down that process there and then. So yes, it might take a whole day, but that means that you haven't had 2,000 or 3,000 emails bouncing backwards and forwards and the phone calls, all sorts of different times of day and night and things. You just get it all sorted, you've got everybody's undivided attention, work through it until you get it right. Feedback forums. This can be a great mechanism for you and your team to contribute and kind of feedback. So think about how you might work with that. And again, write it down. I know I sound like a broken record, but yep, get it written down, capture it. So work through each process in turn. Think about who will do the task and the process. How will they do it? How will it be recorded? How will it be monitored? That's a really key one. And I think Emma's echoed that as well with kind of the reporting and Sam. Will you need to report on it? If so, how and when? That's really important. If I was to give any advice on this part of the process is to start at the end and flip it. So go all the way back and say, what do you need to get out of the process and what do you need to know? And then make sure we flip that and bring it right in from the beginning. So a few outputs from those, if we think and we go through those processes, we could then understand, for example, what user types you'll need, what kind of process improvement you need, and obviously the fact that you go paperless. You'll think about kind of who needs the kind of mobile access and what permissions those people will need, who will need systems admin, super user access levels and training. You'll understand what data needs to go into the system. So that's really important when it comes to that point of what fields do we do, what drop-down options do we have. If you thought about the reporting right at the beginning, then you can factor that in the build. Otherwise, you come to the end of it. I know certainly when I worked through this with Emma, we did a lot of this, didn't we, Emma? We got a huge amount of fields in the database that we weren't going to use necessarily quite early on. But I think now it's probably reaping its rewards in terms of your reporting and your dashboards, and now you're ready to approach that. So, challenges, how to overcome them. So, one of the biggest things we have is problem with levers. So that could be levers at any point during the process, but typically it's 2 to 3 weeks before go live. Just typically where I haven't got enough time to hand things over. So, but what can we do? It can have a really detrimental effect on kind of how you work and where you're at in terms of your project. So, make sure that they're not the only person who's continually involved throughout. So I would always say that. So if you're going to have a main kind of lead person, make sure there is somebody who's always following and always involved with them. That way, if you do have somebody who leaves, you've got somebody who's been very, very close to it all the way through, if not directly involved all the way through. Keep good records of your progress. It comes down to me saying, write it down, write it down, write it down. If you've got a good track of what's happened, when it's happened, why it's happened, again, it will be much more helpful for you. alongside that kind of working with finding somebody else to work alongside, if you can identify, I used to call it a second in command, a 2IC, but kind of having that person who will be that kind of, you know, if Kim goes off sick or whatnot, then you can hand over to somebody. So make sure your project's on the radar with the right people. I think Emma mentioned about IT there. Again, often missed. Laura's nodding her head as well. IT is somebody that we need to pay more attention to. You know, even if they don't have to do a great deal, they want to know a great deal, and we can help them with that. Find out if other projects overlap with yours. I've fallen foul of this. I've been given the go-ahead by my manager to go off and work on a project. 6 months down the line, when I'm just about to sign an order, somebody says, well, that's already been involved in that system over there. I didn't know that. So yeah, have a good think. Talk to people in your business and see what's going on. And engage your users early on, the doers, like I said, the people who actually do the job, because they offer some really fabulous insights. Communication, I think these last two go very much hand in hand, but can also be separate. Poor communication, so you might have engaged with the stakeholders, but then you've not told them what's happening or when it's going to happen. So what can we do to avoid it? See who needs to, identify who needs to work, so know about your project, what they need to know and when they need to know it. If you give them everything all in one hit 6 months before you launch, nobody's going to remember it, so think about what they need to know when they need to know it. A communications plan can be really great for that, and again, it doesn't have to be anything fancy, anything clever, but just, you know, just a series of dates, what needs to happen and when and to whom. And share it with people involved in the project so they also know. So again, communicate your communications plan and get that out there. Planning. Plan with your team. Assess the risk and flag the high-rated risks early on. Plan for some contingency. Most projects need a little bit of something extra. We said already that kind of resource particularly is something that you're automatically going to need because it's just more work, but also plan some contingency time and budgeting. You might not necessarily need it, but you do have it a little bit there in your back pocket if you need it. Monitor the progress so you know where you're at. Measure. What does the business need? What will you measure and how will you measure it? So I think those 5 things are quite key. Moving on then, so we've implemented our system, so should we evaluate the project? This isn't a question for me, this is a statement. The answer is yes, you have to. If you don't do that, you know, you can have no proof, you've got nothing for future results, and also you've got nothing to help drive kind of future change in that continuous improvement piece. So we're looking really to find out things like, has the project delivered what it was intended to do? Was it delivered on time and on budget? It's amazing how many people don't capture that. It's a really important one to do. Have you seen the business improvements that you expected? So the system might do what you wanted it to do and it was on time and on budget, but did you get the improvements that you wanted? Did you get a reduction in that time to hire that you wanted? Did you get a reduction in the time it takes to do X job from 20 minutes to 10 minutes? Did you get that? And if you didn't, why not? And has the time and money been well spent? So some of those are quantitative, some of those are qualitative and quite subjective as well. But I think it's very important to get those kind of lessons learned from around the business. But what should we measure and how? So we all know this one, I think, don't we? SMART objectives. So really super basic. I kind of think we're all comfortable in terms of what they stand for. Everybody has a slightly different version of that. So, you know, relevant could be realistic, achievable, attainable. They're all kind of interchangeable. But I've seen this one. This is a real one a customer gave me. So improve our time to hire. Yeah, absolutely, you want to improve your time to hire, but it's not SMART at all. So if we turn that into a SMART objective, it might be something like reduce the time to hire across the retail division to 14 days by the 31st of March. And then we've also added the definition of what time to hire is in there. So it's the calendar days from the date the vacancy requisition is approved to the date the candidate accepts the offer. We are crystal clear. So it's specific, so we're happy that we've got enough detail in there to know exactly what we're measuring. It's actually measurable, we can actually do something about that, so that's a tick. It's achievable, it's something that we can absolutely do. It's relevant to our business, and also it's time bound, so it ticks all the boxes. So we all know about these things and we know the theory of it, but actually do we take the time to sit down and go, right, this is what I want to do, this is my measure, my KPI. Do we actually go back and tick the box and say, is it SMART, and go through each of those? Let's have a think about it next time you do something.